So, I'm really excited to be joined today by Joanne Lockwood, the founder of See Change Happen, which is a workplace inclusion consultancy based in the UK. I'm not going to give too much introduction because I think you will be inspired and really enjoy what you're going to see. So, sit back and relax, and I will let Joanne take over from here. Joanne.
Thanks, Matt. Morning, everybody. Inspired. There's no pressure at all to inspire. I was chatting in the green room before you all joined, and Claire mentioned the new Russell T Davies drama that's playing out on the TV at the moment. I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen the reviews and I've seen some of the narrative around it. Let me just spotlight myself so I'm big, so you can see me. That's better. Um, And today is the 2nd of June, and normally on the 2nd of June, us LGBTQIA plus people are waving our flags, and pride is in this sort of front of our mind, and we're all celebrating. You go on LinkedIn, and the logos are changing. Everyone's saying what a wonderful, inclusive environment that they're creating, and everybody suddenly is becoming a queer ally. Everyone's got a gay friend. Everybody wants to big up trans people. But this year is different. This year is completely different. And, Claire made a quick remark before she stopped talking and said, there's a rise in homophobia. There's a rise in biphobia. There's a rise in transphobia. There's a rise in phobias across the board. And it's not just within the queer community. I was in London on the September, I can't remember the exact date. I think it was about 12th of September last year. And I was going to an event near Waterloo, and I walked out the station and I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, everyone's walking around the streets here with flags, Union Jack flags. And I thought, what's going on? What's going on? So I asked somebody, and it was the Unite the Kingdom first rally organised by Tommy Robinson in that part of London. And I looked around and I felt unsafe. I felt really, really unsafe being a UK citizen, a queer woman in London at that time. It wasn't anything particular. There was no trouble. There was nothing kicking off. What it was just a vibe. There was a vibe in the ether that made me feel uncomfortable at that moment. And then I looked around at the people, and it wasn't a stereotype of what I would imagine a flag waving person attending a Tommy Robinson march would look like. This was families. There were children. There were mums. There were dads. There were grandmas there. There were people from all walks of life. And it made me realize that what we have at the moment in the UK is a divided population. People who've been disenfranchised for whatever reason now feel that they're uniting around this other message. And we're seeing it in the political sphere as well, the rise of parties. And I think I hope you don't mind me using the word queer. I prefer it's easier to say than LGBTQIA plus. Queer for me just says it. So that's the terminology I'm using. As queer people, having spent decades seeing our psychological safety, our inclusion in society growing and growing and growing year on year, we've now seeing that being erased almost in the course of 1 year. If we compare where we are now to Pride last year, we're seeing a completely different side. And I think that's the framing I'd like to use today around psychological safety. And it's not just the buzzwords, the 4 pillars, which I will talk about in a minute, but how do we feel, not just in the workplace, but in society? When we're going out, when we're going to the gym, when we're going to the pub, when we're going to walking around town, how do we feel? I think psychological safety can't be just taken as a workplace thing. It's also how do I feel in society, in my family, and everywhere else? I think we really need to start coming together as our queer communities and start looking at this, because and I know other people I speak to, are feeling this pain. We're feeling this unease about what's going to go on next. We're looking at headlines, we're looking at news articles, we're looking at polls and opinion polls for political parties, and we're getting worried that suddenly we're going to shift to a place where we don't want to be. We're seeing the example of what's going on in the US. We're seeing examples in some countries around the world. And that's not the UK I was brought up in. That's not the world I wanted to do. And as I say, I feel the psychological safety that I experience now is severely degraded. And I think that's the background of today, really. I know Matt said at the beginning that, keep yourself on mute, keep yourself, if you don't want to be recorded, all that stands. But I really would like to hear from people as I go through. You can pop it in the chat, but I'm not very good at talking and reading. So I'll try and keep my eye on it. But please stick your hand up. And I'd love to hear where you are right now, if you like. If anyone wants to give a different perspective or even echo what I've just said. Has anyone got any thoughts on that? You can pop your hand up or you can just start unmute and talk if you wish. Yeah, Liz.
Hi, yes. Joanne, I totally hear you. From a place when I came out in 2011, and I thought the UK was at the forefront of being a safe place to be as a queer person. We've steadily gone down and down and down and down and down, and all the political parties are guilty of this. They've done nothing to intercede with the narrative that's being put out there. I think, and especially against trans people of all people, I think has been the most noticeable element of that shift in focus. And it just worries me that we've gone from being kind of like 99% at the top of the charts to kind of like 44% and down to about 35th in Europe. It's just incredible. And yet you look at Hungary, that's gone from a complete far right-wing dictatorship, basically, and they brought in a reforming, kind of like left side, more progressive parliament. And it just, I can't get my head around it,
Yeah,
and I don't
I
feel
hear you.
safe. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
Peace and love to everybody, though.
yeah. I hear you. Trevor, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Joanne. I don't disagree with anything that's been said. I also think it's important to not necessarily just stereotype other people. And I think it's important not to make out anyone who supports a right-wing party as necessarily gay or homophobic. Is homophobic or anti. There's lots of reasons why. So I think there's a danger of when we feel unsafe, stereotyping other people or kind of seeing the response we have everywhere. So, and I think it's probably a bit more nuanced than that. And times can change. And I came out in 1991, so I've been out a long time. And in 1991, things were very different. When I had my partner, I wanted to put my partner on my pension. I don't know if it's changed now, but I was told that basically the pension company could decide if I died whether to give my pension to my partner or not. So there has been a lot of progress, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't be concerned. But I think it's more maybe more nuanced, or we should be kind of keep a cool head as well.
I completely agree, Trevor. And I think the point that struck me on that day in Waterloo in London was that it wasn't the stereotype of what I imagined. It was the fact it was a cross-section society, and it highlighted that there's a disenfranchisation that's occurred across society, but it didn't change how I felt as a queer trans woman walking around the streets and the unsafeness I felt with that vibe in the air. But I completely agree. Yeah, we shouldn't be demonizing others for their views, their beliefs, and their opinions. And that's what got us, some might say that's what got us into this mess in the first place. We started labeling people and throwing things around. So I completely agree. Right. If there's no more hands in the air, let me check out the presentation and start working through this. Otherwise we'll just get chit-chatty all the time. So hopefully you can see that over my shoulder. Yeah. All good? Yeah, you can see that okay. So the framing is, it's around psychological safety, and I just say I don't want to just do this as a 4 pillars of psychological safety, challenger, learning, all that, but without it referencing back to the contemporary where we are today in society, and what's going on and how we feel. I think that's the important thing here is how do we feel, because you can't tell someone it's psychological safety. It's a feeling. It's how do you feel. You can create environments, you can create workplaces, you can create cultures, but how do people feel? And I think, just picking up on Trevor's point again, that it's incumbent not to limit who is entitled to psychological safety. Everybody is. It's not a value add, and it's only queer people, only black people, only everybody needs to feel psychological safety, which is why we now have to have, I guess, more tolerance to different views, different opinions, and then try and find that line where we decide what's tolerable and what is intolerable, and then be intolerant of the intolerance. So I think that's the fine line we've got to walk. So I think what we've got to try and do now is work out what we can do where we are in society. And we talk about this as being psychological, is being able to speak up without fear. That's kind of how we frame it. Well, the old adage was, bring your whole self to work, and I always said, bring your whole self to work is it's easy for you to say when you're this, and this, and this. But as soon as you add another dimension, another flavour into that, it becomes a lot harder to bring that whole self to work. I think what we have to try and recognise here is that where we are in 2026, it's now become a lot harder to bring that whole self to work without being worried about how you're going to be judged. Maybe trans people, queer, the QIA plus element of the rainbow flag is probably feeling that more. There's no advantage now for me to out myself. I am actually safer by keeping my mouth shut and not outing myself. So that ability to speak up, that ability to be me, has been restricted over the last 12 to 18 months. So and I think many other people are feeling that as well. I remember when organisations were proud to fly the Progress Pride flag down the streets outside of big London department stores. Now people are getting complaints for flying any flag that has the trans colours in it, or even has the black and brown colours in it. People seem to be okay with the original Pride flag, but the Progress flag is now being seen as a political symbol, and that's pervasive. So again, people can't even visibly display signs of allegiance and allyship now without being worried about being shut down. So again, even our allies are being attacked or marginalized as well. So everyone's now worried about speaking out and saying. And I think, again, the point Trevor made and others make often is that do you say partner? Do you say husband? How do you describe the people around you? And I think some of us are starting to become, again, self-censoring. We don't share that information voluntarily because we don't want to necessarily see how people are going to react. So I think that's really, really important. And I was on the phone yesterday to my pension company, and I was misgendered 5 times by the same person, having explained to them on at least 4 of the occasions that I was definitely a madam, and that yes, this was my policy we were talking about. And it happens all the time. So, things like this make me feel less believed that organisations are actually doing the training and doing the work. So I think what we've got to do is let's talk through the 4 stages of psychological safety. And I'll do a little poll in a minute after I've talked through these, and we can see where you fit on these and see if you've got an opinion as well. In fact, no, let's do the poll first. Let's do that first. Let me just chuck that on the screen. Is that, have I shared that? Is that now on the screen? The quiz?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a QR code there. Are you able to just scan that in, and we'll go through the quick poll, get your juices flowing, get you interacting a bit. Yeah, I can see you connecting there. 14, 15. There we go. 19. I'll let it get to 30. And then I'll kick it off. So if you're still joining, don't worry. I'll walk through it slowly. Okay, good. There we go. So this is a quick check-in on inclusion, visibility, and speaking up. This is a word cloud. So it's asking for 3 ideas from you, 1 word or 2 words if you can. What helps people feel safe to speak up, in your opinion? What do you think? Let's pop that into a word cloud. Trust, yeah. Empathy, action, acceptance, yeah. Confidence, yeah. Leaders, model behavior, yeah. Encouragement, openness. So I'm sure we can all resonate with those words that are coming out there, and it's all part of the psychological safety that we talk about, or that's where we want to try and aim ourselves. Okay. It's going to ask you to pop your name in here. You can put whatever you like in there. It doesn't have to be your name. You can put a cartoon character. It's just because it does have a leaderboard. Each of these questions is timed, and you get points. So we'll see who the winner is. It's a bit of a gamification. There we go. But don't have to put your own name in there if you don't want to. And we're doing 23 players, 24, 25. There we go. So say it is timed, and you'll see a little countdown chart, countdown by on there, and there's no prizes, only bragging rights, Okay, let's go. Let's do it now. Here we go. Start. Question 1 of 5. Here we go. What's the primary question that many LGBTQI individuals may contemplate in the workplace? Is everyone here my friend? Is it safe enough for me to speak, disclose? Does this organisation have an inclusion policy? Will this meeting finish on time? What do you think is the burning question there? For 5 seconds, here we go. 2. Time's up. So the answers, the majority came up with, is it safe enough for me to speak up and disclose? Excellent. Good. Question 2. Oh, sorry. Click the button there. Sorry, I messed that up. There we go. Question 2. Which option best defines inclusion safety? Being invited to every meeting, being accepted as the person without excessive masking or editing, being promoted quickly, being asked to speak on behalf of all LGBTQIA plus people. And isn't that the way? You're queer. Can you give us your opinion, please? Yep, it's the second option again, and everyone's saying that. Yay! Well, someone thinks it's being asked to speak up. Excellent. Yeah, it feels like that sometimes, doesn't it? Becoming the spokesperson. All right. 3 or 5. What are potential issues with the concept of bringing your whole self to work? I mentioned that earlier. It's always legally incorrect. It assumes everyone wants to the same level of visibility. It only applies to senior leaders, and it removes the need for work-based policies. What do we think? Five seconds. Here we go. And then we're on to our last question. Show the answers. There we go. I've just realised answer 2 seems to be the default. I must have, when I created this quiz and imported it in the spreadsheet, I must have made answer 2 the correct one all the time. Oh well. Let's see if answer 2 is the same on the next question as well. So now I've pointed that out, you're going to go straight for answer 2. And what is common in the way organisations unintentionally undermine psychological safety? Too many social events, confusing inclusion statements with safety, offering training to managers, or asking employees for feedback. I think this is answer 2 again, isn't it? I've messed up here with the questions. Oh well. Yay, it's answer 2. There we go. Anyway, let's see you on the oh, sorry, we've got one more. Have we got one more? Here we go. What does challenge to safety allow people to do? Avoid difficult conversations, challenge norms, raise concerns, speak only when invited, or represent the whole community. Yeah, and yes, I've messed up. It's question 2 again. There we go. Damn it, using AI to generate questions and build a spreadsheet of import.
Think of how confused we'd all have been if the last one was 3, though. You would have just seen us all be absolutely
I know,
flunked.
everyone's voted for the wrong one. Yeah, I should have done that, shouldn't I? Just set you up. There we go. Answer 2. There we go. Everyone's got it right this time. Okay, so who was quickest to hit the button? Oh, no, sorry. Hang on. I've got one more question first. How are you feeling right now? And you can, this is a genuine open question. How are you feeling about yourself, about the world, about whatever you want to say? Just how are you feeling right now? This is anonymous. Just curious. Exhausted. Yeah. Disenfranchised. Reflective. There's some powerful words in there. I think it's fair to say that a lot of us are feeling the same way. Uncertain, half and half, unsafe, nervous. I try not to think or react. I'm guessing that it's going to be worried, suspicious. Those are really powerful words. I feel it. I feel it too. And hopefully it wasn't my framing that made you feel that way. But yeah, it's the way of the world at the moment. And I think when going back to the core topic here of psychological safety, we're not feeling that psychological safety in society, in the workplace, and maybe in our social, everywhere in our social lives. And that's the struggle we're facing. Let's just put that into groups if it has that group. So yeah, that's how the systems group those. That's coming out. Worried, but there's optimism in there. I'm glad there's optimistic. There is some optimism, and I think as a community, as our communities, as people coming together, this too shall pass is what I often say, and hopefully that's where we are now. This too shall pass. Okay, right. So there we go. So Alex was most efficient at guessing question 2. Brilliant. Well done, Alex. Round of applause. Right. Thank you so much. Right. Let's go back to the deck. So inclusion safety. Let's talk about that. It's when we think about inclusion safety, what does it mean? I talked about it earlier. I said bringing your whole self to work, be able to speak up, be able to speak freely. I can turn up as myself. I can do me my way without having to cover, mask, or pretend to be somebody else. And simple things like, can I talk about my partner? Do your policies at work, do the environments you hang out in always assume that everyone is cisgender? I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, there was Marks and Spencer's. They produced the Colin the Caterpillar cake, and then they brought out a Connie caterpillar. And then for Valentine's Day, they had a Colin and Connie love nest. And that was well-meaning from an organization that produced the LGBTQIA or the LGBTQ sandwich with guacamole in it. They suddenly brought out this heterosexual cake for Valentine's Day, which completely disenfranchised anybody who is in a multi-sex relationship. And yeah, I maintained at the time that there should be a Colin and Colin love nest and a Colin and Connie, a Connie and Connie, or a Colin and Connie polyamorous love nest, and they shouldn't be restricting it just to the stereotypical. I think that's what we find. We're finding in mainstream greetings cards in our everyday life, cisgender, cis-heteronormative descriptions are the default, and you have to then navigate through that, and you become the difference, which is why you don't always want to speak up and talk about who you are, because you are the default and you have to out yourself and be very deliberate about that. The learner safety is about our ability to grow and make mistakes and receive feedback. And I think what we often do is through our own queer lens is we've got people in our communities who may be newly out, they're testing the language, they haven't necessarily lived through generations of discrimination or repression or abuse. The language is changing. We've got younger people using different language to the older people. We've got, is this word contemporary? I mean, I've used the word queer several times, and I know some people struggle with that word from their own history, but many of today's young people use it and have owned it. We recognise that people who are bi often have to challenge assumptions with their own language, and we know there's a lot of biphobia out there within both the queer communities and also the straight communities. People just don't understand. I myself would describe myself as pansexual because I think it's a bit too tricky to narrow yourself down to a sort of a heteronormative definition of sexuality. It's not binary, and I definitely see myself in some sort of cloud somewhere. But how to explain that to somebody who doesn't get it? So I think, again, learner safety is around allowing people the room to become, that questioning space, that understanding, that building their language without being shot down. And I know we can be quite brutal as a community to try and police our own members, if you like, into the way we perform or we conform. I think we need to give people space to evolve the language, because being, I look at some of the biggest barriers to inclusion is the fear of getting it wrong, fear of speaking up, fear of saying something, and people get shot down for it. And we're not talking just about our allies; we see it all the time within ourselves. And we need to be more tolerant, more open, more able to listen, and to more expansive. And there's a term, a word, equanimity. Having more equanimity, being able to hold multiple perspectives, as not as our truth, but understanding we can coexist in a world that has different views. And I think that's going to help us move forward, rather than demonizing or criticizing people for holding views. Because when people are disenfranchised, we have to understand why. So I think we need to learn, rather than what people believe, is why people believe something. So people can explain their fears and what's going wrong in their lives. And then we have the contributor safety. And I think this is about, can we speak up? And when an organization says to you, we value LGBTQIA voices, it sounds really positive, doesn't it? We want to hear your opinions, but really, do they? And again, this is Pride Month. We're in a situation here where traditionally we're heard, and maybe this year we're not being heard so much, and it's a real struggle. So when people ask for our opinions, are we able to talk about the EHRC code for services? Are we able to talk about that? Are we able to talk about the change in policies that organisations are pushing through now? Are our ERG staff networks, are our trans people, are our non-binary people, are bi, lesbian and gay people being listened to in these conversations? Or are these being imposed as this is the way we have to do things? So are we doing effectively an equality impact assessment here? Are we listening to the affected people and seeing how we can minimise people's pain, people's fears in the least discriminatory way possible, showing that balance of proportionality that the people seem so keen to talk about within the Equality Act, proportionality and legitimate aims. So I think we've also got to be careful that we don't become the educator. And I know we complain when we're not involved, and then we complain when we have to do the education. So it's trying to find that fine line where we are being listened to for our opinions and able to contribute, but not being assumed that we are the educator. Because the danger is we become the one who speaks for ourselves, not on behalf of everybody else. And if you're not careful, you end up with 50 opinions and not one decision. So we can't dress that up, this emotional labor, and call it engagement. It's not inclusion. So organizations need to structure the way they engage in a far more disciplined way through ERGs, through staff networks, so that people don't feel that they are the unpaid trainer, the unpaid educator to the organization, whilst also being heard. And I think, again, we should call this out. This is not about Pride Month. This is not about hashtags. It's not about following LinkedIn trends. This is a 365, 24/7 activity. And then challenger safety, which is where we can actually feel that we can call out, we can whistleblow, we can say, hang on a minute, that's not right. This is impacting me, and someone's going to listen to you. They're not just seeing you as a troublemaker. They're not trying to victimize you. They're making sure that the policies that are implemented have your voice, and when they don't represent you, you're able to call that out. Because I think we're going to see a situation where alternative voices seem to be trusted more than our voices right now. I see that with the rise of people who hold less than trans positive views having greater authority in organizations and being listened to as reasonable concerns, as now protected by the law. So for organizations, I appreciate it's very tricky to try and toe that middle line, but we've got to try and look at how we can have that contribution that we've always had without being dismissed as ideologically motivated, whatever that means. So again, that means we've got to try and root our own truth and be able to speak up. And our allies are also stepping back, and they don't feel safe either. So again, it's how do we re-engage with our allies, re-engage with people, re-engage with our HR teams, re-engage with society to be able to speak up and be listened to, rather than just being the ideological voice, the protest voice. We need to start being seen back at that top seat of the table again. So I'd say that most organizations, they don't set out to undermine psychological safety. What they're often doing is reacting to situations. There's an inconsistency. They don't really understand some of the dynamics at play. They're looking at maybe the loudest voice. They're hearing this shouting. They're reading the headlines. People are getting in their heads and they're being pulled from pillar to post. They're flip-flopping. They're overcorrecting. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. We also see a lot of organizations who are constrained. They don't know what to do. They've been waiting for this code of practice. Code of practice comes out. They're looking at it going, how can we make that work? We can't do that. I mean, all of our recognition, all our support we've given to our LGBTQA colleagues over the last 20 or 30 years, we're having to dial back on how do we do that? So not only are employees hurting, the HR people, the policymakers are also confused by this. We've got managers, we've got leadership tiers in our organizations who don't know what to say. So often, if you work in one department, you get one view, you work in another department, you get another view. And the people around you often dictate what the policy is, the loudest voice, the heckler's veto that often occurs. And this frozen manager level is just sitting there not knowing what to do. I think that's where organizations now need to start tackling this. How do we get managers feeling confident, overcome this fear of getting it wrong? The rhetoric is that trans people are still protected. The rhetoric is LGBTQI plus people are still have to be treated with dignity and respect. So what does that look like in everyday terms? I think our organizations need help with that still. So we have to think about how we're going to do this. And we also can't ignore the tension, the discomfort. The Equality Act, equality in the UK, does not say that everybody has to be comfortable. What it's trying to do is balance those rights, balance those beliefs, balance those situations where we have to recognize there are rough edges. There will be friction between different groups, different people. And what we are as a society is about trying to make that work. And that could be in the workplace. It could be, and it's not just around our communities, it's people with disability, people with neurodiversity, people who are having other challenges with their faith and beliefs and their religion. So we've got to think about how those discomforts come together, and we shouldn't be clashing. We should be trying to blend together. And I think the other thing is trying to avoid this. We need a policy. And I'm a great believer that organizations need less policies. They need better behavior. They need to talk about what is good behavior, what is bad behavior, not what is your identity, what is this, what is the other. So trying to come together here and not put policies on the table. This is about humans. And what we need is human interactions, human ways of working together, not bits of paper, not PDFs on shelves. I think that's the key thing. So I think organizations are looking for a way out. They want someone to give them the answer. They want a policy. They're scared about getting it wrong. They're confused. Managers don't know what they're doing. So we, if you like, the royal we here, are left feeling this confusion. And when there's confusion, and I saw at the work health, there's a lack of trust. If we've got lack of trust, how can we feel safe in our environment? If I can't trust you with my well-being, how am I going to feel? And that's why my psychological safety starts to crash when I can't trust you. So what does it look like? What can we do? And I appreciate we are either at the top of the funnel here, the bottom of the funnel, but I think we can all try and influence. I think what we need to try and do is promote consistency. We want to know where we stand. We want to know what world we're living in. We want to make sure that we can speak up. We want to make sure that we can disclose without fear. We want to know that I can talk about who I am without people judging me in this world, or seeing me as an ideology, or seeing me as a subversive person in our organization. We need to start working on repairing our culture. We've got these factions developing, and I think it's been developing for many years. And as I say, the Union Jack marches and the other things that are going on right now in our society, the immigration challenges, those are bleeding into our workplaces. We need to come together and not be label A and label B. We need to come together as humans. And I often think about the the French culture. The French society culture is that French people are French first, not an identity first. I think maybe we've lost that. We need to come together as British people, and not look for our differences, look at our commonalities. Because whilst we're creating these factions, we're playing into the media, we're playing into the polarization, we're playing into systems that thrive by division. And I think we also need then is to think about how we can share these responsibilities, how we can come together, how we don't necessarily have to push it on somebody else, but how we can actually start building our cultures back up by taking responsibility ourselves. Because I'm a great believer that change starts with me. My mantra has always been, when I gender transitioned about 12 years ago, that I had the power to be lovable. I had the power to be liked. I had the power to be worthy of respect. That's something I can change in me. I can't make you love me. I can't make you like me, and I can't make you respect me. All I can do is that work myself. I think if we can all take that on ourselves to do that work and to be the best people we can be, and to start taking that share of responsibility to repair the culture, to help people disclose, and to build that consistency, then I think we will all be in a better place. So a rhetorical sort of final thing before we go into some Q&A is, where do you feel included? Are there places you do feel included, or is it easier to talk about where I feel excluded? Because sometimes it's easier to see the negative, to focus on the pain. So where do we feel included? And what does it feel like to feel included? What signals do you want to send out? Think about the risks that you face right now, the face of your colleagues, even if you're not within the LGBTQI plus community yourself or an ally. What risks do you see? What challenges do you see? What do you see going on in the news? What do you see going on in the world that is chipping away at our culture in society and in our workplace? And what can we do to hold the rope? What can we do to grab that rope and stop it slipping through our fingers, stop it slipping through the world we live in right now? And I think that's what's ebbing away. We're seeing our psychological safety being eaten up. And I think we've got to look at everybody's perspective on this, because there are clearly people who've been disenfranchised in whatever's going on in the world right now, that are latching on to messages that give them a heightened sense of safety because they're scared as well. So we've got to understand other people's fears and what's going on in the world. So finally, psychological safety is, you can't give it. It's a feeling. Do you have it or not? I would encourage you to think about where you are in your psychological safety. How do you feel right now? And how can you come together? Because the word cloud we did earlier was very emotional for me. I think we need to understand that we're all going through pain, and we're all suffering from a lack of trust right now. So how can we come together? So thank you very much. And just, if anybody was at the conference last November, you may remember the rope that I passed around the room. And this is my metaphor that we all should be doing here. And it's holding this rope. Because right now, we've all got blisters as the rope is being pulled through our hands. But if we all hang on to this and don't let it go, then we'll stop that erosion. And because together we can hold the rope. And I think that's what I would leave you with. How can you hold the rope? Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll take the spotlight off. Then we can go for some, if anyone wants to go in and stick your hand up, I'm happy to do some Q&A, or you can share your pain.
Claps and love hearts there. I hope you can see those, Joanne.
Yeah.
So we're just going to open for questions now. So yeah, as I said before, just a quick reminder, feel free to raise your hand if you're happy to speak on video, and we'll go around the virtual room. And if you'd like to ask a question in the chat, then feel free and I can read it out if you prefer that. So Bryony, I think you were quick with your hand up there. Do you want to jump in and start us off?
Thank you. It's probably the only time my brain's going to be quick today. I think more of a reflection than a question. I think what you were talking about sort of us having to hold that emotional and educational labour for ourselves. I think something that I've noticed is quite often we need to advocate for ourselves when we are least able to do it. It's when something's gone wrong or we need to fight for something, we might not have that emotional or psychological battery to do it. So it's more about, is there a way to find that foundational knowledge and sort of share in advance, and making sure we're setting up those foundations of awareness across our spaces to make them more safe from the outset rather than waiting for something to fall down.
Yeah, I hear you. One thing that frustrates me often is the one and done attitude that people have to training. The number of training courses I've run for organizations, and I always offer a 30-day follow-up. I always offer some coaching. I always offer something more or for the next cohort. And it's always, oh, we've done that now. We need to move on to something else. We've got budget for this. And oh, it's menopause next. No, we've got to do this next. And we've got to do that. And I think what I want to encourage people to do is have this is sort of awareness is over here. We're good at awareness. We can have these lunch and learns. We can do these lived experience talks. We do all of this stuff. We do it really well. But where's the curve to action? And I think what we always do is we're never measuring the outcomes and the actions. We're just doing the awareness and go, oh, it's lovely. And it's no longer lovely. We need to see what's going to go on here. And I think, again, if you can take something away, is how do you go from here, awareness, to action? And that's where the change has to occur, that sort of transformation in the middle. And organizations need to build that. And that comes down to the psychological safety, whatever we're talking about here. But pride is very good at awareness, not so good for action.
Important comment here from H in the chat. Whilst working together is a nice idea, employers have a legal duty under the Health and Safety at Work Act in 1974 to protect the health and safety of their employees, which includes psychological safety.
Yeah, and if you also look at some of the Employment Rights Act coming in and the Workers' Rights Protection, all the other new legislation that's coming in at the moment, there's a lot more centering of this within the employer's responsibility around harassment, around discrimination. And it's no longer good enough to say, oh, we provide some training. You've got to evidence it. You've got to make sure that you are proactive. You can't, as an employer, you can't just walk away saying, oh, well, it happened. You're now, as an employer, you're now proactively having to ensure that you put mechanisms, systems in place under the Employment Rights Act and other modifications. So, and protective information disclosure, PIDO is there, and we've got anti-harassment stuff which you've got to look at as well. So, I think employers need to start looking at the legislation and how they're going to change their HR systems and policies to protect workers and rights better. But that doesn't change society. This is employment. So you've got the services versus employment sort of side as well.
Alex asks, I take the point and agree about behaviour being more important than policy in isolation. But isn't policy also important as protection against those who may wish to behave badly?
Is it? Yeah. Does a policy stop people behaving badly? If it did, we wouldn't have employment tribunals. Policy sets the bench, sets the base, sets the foundation, sets the floor. If you're relying on a policy, then I personally believe you're doing the minimum. And if you're not careful, a policy can't be all things to all people in all ways. It has to be a framework. So I think behavior, what we want to do is we want to. You can't manage identity. You can't manage. There's a lot of things you can't manage, but you can manage behavior. You can manage bad behavior. You can correct behavior. You can call out behavior. So if you're looking at what behaviors you're trying to encourage and what behaviors you're trying to discourage, that is easier than having a policy. Okay, you can judge the behavior against the policy. So you've got to have the policy in the first place. But a lot of that is culture. People will behave as the culture dictates. You've seen how Britain was a drinking, boozy culture. We now have coffee shop culture. We've seen how we've got an intolerance now to drink driving, which we didn't have. Smoking, as we've got an intolerance in society to smoking now. So there's a lot of things that do change as a result of policy, but that influences culture as well. And I think we as a society would rather live in where culture dictates what we do rather than just relying on a policy.
Thanks, John. Liz, did you want to jump in?
If that's okay.
Go for
I just wanted to touch on the issue of policies and how important they are. They are important, and they are important that they are used correctly. Like any tool, if you don't use them properly, they're not going to work. But in my circumstances at work, when I went into what happened, I found that my trust had broken about two-thirds of the policies they had written around what they should have done that they didn't do to protect me at work because they just hadn't enforced any of what was going wrong. So it comes down to, do you have people that are leading by example and doing what they should be doing, either at a professional level by the code of conduct or at a managerial level by the code of duty of care? So it's a fine balance between the two.
Yeah, and I
But
think the other side of that with policy is you have a policy, but how do you operationalize it? It's all very well saying we're going to do this, but how do you operationalize that? How do you train your managers? Do you create scripts? Do you create specific training courses on how to implement that policy? Are your managers confident and competent in that policy to be able to hold it evenly and fairly across their department, across the organization? And I think HR often publish a policy without the operationalization. And, we can look at the Supreme Court judgment. We can look at the EHRC code of practice. Yeah, you've got a policy. How are you going to operationalize that when it says quite clearly in the code of practice, you can't go around asking people what's between their legs. You can't go ask people what their biology is. So you're then basing it on guesswork, and then it becomes a kind of a perception-based policy, which again is not a policy. It's become subjective rather than objective. So I would say policies need to be operationalized, training, managers need to have scripts, you need to have HR teams that can then mentor managers and be able to give advice as well. And that's the struggle I see, is the operationalization of them.
Kelvin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Joanne, for a really interesting presentation. Thanks. I attended the Pride Wide Summit on Friday. Some of you might have seen that on LinkedIn, various posts, really motivating speakers there. I'll put a link into the chat for those of you who've missed it. But one of the observations made during the summit last Friday was about infrastructure. So policy and rights, but there being a widening gap between our ability to access that. And it strikes me, and it's partly observation, partly a question to you. The observation being that as a 42-year-old man coming out as bisexual later in life, I'm trying to make sense of my experience being someone who's been an ally and a friend of the queer community and now part of the queer community. And I suppose the observation being that your rope is absolutely critical, that we all need to work together much more as a community. And that's also why I use the word queer. But the question to you is just, what we could all do to make a better job of bridging that gap, and not only upholding those rights, and Liz obviously reflected on her own personal experience there, but what can we be doing more to bridge it, Joanne?
Yeah, I'd be a millionaire if I had the answer to that, wouldn't I? I mean, it's what could we be doing?
Even small things.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think it's so overwhelming sometimes. It's like we all need to take away those little nudges.
I often use the social model of disability as there's two models, the medical model and the social model. And people would argue that it's not the disability that is the issue, the medical side of it, it's the societal's social constructs, the framework in which you exist that creates the disability. So by designing good systems where they're accessible, they work for everybody, then the person who holds that disability doesn't feel the edges, doesn't feel the friction. So I would say maybe in our environment, it's the environment in which we live that needs to be fixed. It's not us to have to fix to fit the environment. Well, okay, to a certain extent, we can't expect everybody to blend to everybody's thing. But what I often talk about the Safari Park model, where what you're trying to do here is you're trying to create a big enough field where we can all coexist. There's no threats. I know where the fence is, and I don't have to bump into it. I don't want to live in a cage. I don't want to live in a zoo. I don't want to be at risk by living in the savannah in the middle, out in the jungle. I quite like the safari. I want to know where society sits here. So I think maybe to answer your question, what we can try and do here is build our safari park where we understand what the barriers are. They're far enough apart so that we don't bump into them. We know where we exist. We make sure that we're living in a community where people aren't going to eat us. You know, the lions are on the other side. We're segregated because it makes sense, not segregated because we don't trust each other. You know, if you could treat lions as friends, fair enough, but we can't. So what we're trying to do is recognize building our safari park. And I think that's not an easy task, but we don't want to live in a cage and we don't want to live in the wild. So trying to find that middle ground. And when you talked about yourself about coming out recently, entering that community, I remember my wife, Marie, we'd been married for 30 odd years. Me coming out suddenly pushed her into the queer community, and as a bisexual woman, as an ally, more than just an ally, but also part of the community as well. So we've also got to recognize that not everybody is an activist in this space. So we've got to help people who just want to get on with their life as well. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of my thinking on it.
Thank you. I'm not seeing the chat. It's prompted a few observations as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Kelvin. Just time for one question, one more question if we're quick, if that's all right, Joanne, from Alex here. Much of the discussion has been predicated on organisations that wish to support LGBTQ plus employees and how they can do this. Any advice for existing or for improving things within organisations or professions that are more inimical to queer liberation and rights?
This is organisations who are
somewhere
not
hostile or
somewhere hostile. It's a very privileged statement to make. Is if the environment doesn't work for you, change your environment. You can't change the world in all places. There are certain times where you've got to say to yourself, "This place isn't going to work for me. There's nothing I can do here that's going to change how it's going to be." And I've got to think about my own safety. And that's a very privileged thing to say. Is not everyone has that choice to be able to self-select, to be able to move on. But I think sometimes you've got to pick your organization, you've got to pick your society, you've got to pick your friends, you've got to pick someone that works for you and evaluate how you feel that belongingness. If you're not feeling belonging, you're not feeling included, you're not feeling you can speak up, you can challenge, you can grow, you can learn the psychological safety elements, then you have to sometimes say, this isn't for me. And that doesn't make you the wrong person. It doesn't mean they're the wrong organization or the wrong group. It just means that there's an incompatibility. So use your agency to find the one that does work for you. All I would say is you can't change everybody. Just find the people who want to work with you.
Thanks, Joanne. Important note to end on there, not least because of its implied call to self-care, which is especially important in the times that we're living in to care for ourselves and for each other. So yeah, it's been amazing to see some of that care spilling out in the chats and in the conversation today. So if you haven't had a chance yet, do take a look at the chat here too. Thank you so much, Joanne, for a fabulous presentation. Lots of lovely feedback about it in the chat pouring in. Just to remind you all that if you've enjoyed today and would like to attend more of these events, there's plenty more of them on our website. And do remember to check out the fact that you can see some of the lovely people that are on this call in person at our national conference on November the 5th. So yeah, do keep in touch, everybody. We will be sharing this video and a write-up of this online. So if you do wish to share it with anybody in your organization, then you will be able to do so. Thanks so much for joining us on this Tuesday. And yeah, please join me in saying thanks to Joanne as well. Silent applause, the best kind of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.
Great to see you all.